don't even think about like outside money until you figure out a way to kind of monetize the first dollar yourself, right? I think that's more of a driver when I see like the face of my daughters, now there's like a purpose. It's like, okay, I know what I'm working hard for. I'm not working hard to go clubbing on the weekends, now.
Welcome to the Rise and Play podcast. I am Sophie Vo, your host and leadership coach. In the show, my wonderful co-host and I sit down with influential and diverse leaders from the gaming industry to hear about their leadership journey. Not the well-polished stories, but the real stories, the up and down, the breakthrough, and the failures. Or should we rather say learnings? Each episode will transport you into a magical space of vulnerability with our guests. And together, you'll be reminded that no matter how hard it is, you are not alone in this journey and find the courage to keep going. Come and join the ride. Let's begin. Oh, and one last thing, I am working on new ideas to scale our impact on leadership health and consciousness in games. Would you like to be part of the change too? Then let's connect. Now, let's get to the episode. So welcome to a new episode of Rise and Play. And in this series, I'm actually interviewing guests that are coming from not the direct field of making games directly, but more adjacent fields. Today, we're going to focus on music. Yes. And I'm very excited about that to just change a bit on the topic. And I have today with me Eric Tan. So quick background on Eric. He's a highly experienced executive with 17 years in the entertainment and music industries, has held leadership roles at Riot Games, Sony Music, Fifth Journey Limited, which is his own company that he's founded. We'll talk more about that. Interesting background as the work at Riot Games. Eric was the head of music, focusing on APAC, and instrumental in securing high-profile music partnership, collaboration with Jackson Wang and the virtual boy band Heartsteel, and also oversaw music supervision for major projects like Arcane, that we know of, a big franchise, Anniversary Remix and Valorant tracks. And also sometimes interesting as well, Sony Music, where sometimes we wonder how music is connected to growth. Well, in that case, Eric also drove revenue growth by 20% through licensing deals at Sony Music. And that's what we're going to talk about also today. What is the ROI of music? Let me welcome Eric to the show right now. Welcome, Eric. Hi.
Thank you, Sophie. It's a pleasure to be here. I am calling from Hong Kong, and it's a sunny day here at the Clearwater Bay District. It's actually nice and sunny. And yeah, I'm looking forward to having this chat with you.
First time I have a guest from Hong Kong, so I will mark that on my map.
Hey.
So let's get straight in the topic actually about music. I love music. I love music in games. I'll be honest, I haven't spent so much time with music in games, especially coming from mobile, although I appreciate the work. So I'm curious about you. What's your story about music? Because we also overlapped a bit at Game Love. So we were starting from games and so on. So I wonder, how did you get into that world, or was it accidental? Tell us more.
Thanks, Sophie. So, I was born and raised in Hong Kong, but also got to live in different places like the US and the UK. And for me, like you asked me to recall memories of my life, there's always a soundtrack, right? When I'm 6 years old, listening to Canto Pop, from people like Jackie Chung, Leslie Chung, or would it be just, playing the Nintendo? And then my takeaway with it from the Super Mario theme song to, like refilling the airplane, Top Gun theme song. I kind of grew up with these kind of sound bites growing up. But of course, my household has a lot of, memories of different songs from different genres, whether is it like the disco vinyls, of my parents, or, all the way to like, just like, listening to my cousins jamming to like Guns N' Roses, Metallica. Music has always been a part of my life. Before I joined the gaming industry with EA Game Up, I actually had a background with the record labels. So I was with Warner Music and Universal Music. So Warner Music in UK and Universal Music respectively. And then at 2009, this is before Spotify, the industry experienced like 10 years of consecutive revenue loss. And that's when I thought, I was still a young guy. I wanted a change of industry. And in terms of things I really enjoyed growing up as a kid, aside from music, it's also video games. And that's in 2010. That's when I joined EA, and that's what kind of started my gaming industry. So yeah, heavy background in music, but video game is always in the background. Growing up with the likes of Nintendo, PC Engine, Sega Saturn, PC, etc. That it's always been parallel track in terms of the things I enjoy.
So you started with music actually, and you're going back to this childhood love. And then, of course, games is very interconnected with music. And during your career at the multiple companies, especially like EA, Gameloft, and then later, Riot, I'm curious about what has been the evolution you've seen with music in games. And I would like to hear it from your lens.
It's important to kind of draw the distinction between what we call soundtrack, OST in games, so like the music that are in games, and then how do you externally use music to market the games, right? So at Riot, I'm really more on the latter. So not quite the soundtrack, but how do you work with music outside to freshen up your marketing, or maybe even freshen up your UA so that you can be able to generate more fandom that will help on, creating new installs, or, basically make the old feel new again. I think that's been the evolution of music in games, is that we kind of went from just completing the experience of music, completing different senses in the game experience, to now I think it's even more important to consider going to adjacent, industries like music in order to build up fandom. And I would say, Riot's probably one of the pioneers, through high quality music and music video, but we're still got ways to go. I think music marketing is probably still requires a lot of recognition. I think from a marketing budget standpoint, I think music is still like very bottom on the list when it comes to, a game studio would always prioritize UA and other kind of like influencer marketing. And I still see kind of disproportionate amount of marketing getting into music compared to what they would spend on like UA and like other expensive methods anyway. So we're slowly getting there with the likes of Riot and Activision Blizzard and now PUBG Mobile, all these games doing more and more in this space. Hopefully the trend will continue going forward.
So I'm learning something new about also the music outside of games. I didn't know about it. So I'm curious then to understand more from your career. Yeah, where that music part plays and how like concretely it is connected to your, UA strategy or marketing. Because I think here this is the educative part.
Yeah.
How would it be relevant for companies, today's game companies?
Let me maybe draw examples of what we've done recently with the likes of New Jeans and XG, right? So, at Riot, we were very strategic in the type of music and the type of artists that we cast for the campaign. So, but usually it revolves around the same themes, right? Like A, how do you hedge any declines in key markets, right? And then 2, how do you improve on the retention, and how do you make the old feel new again? And then thirdly is what kind of stopgaps can music act as a stopgap between publishing updates, right? So that you don't have to wait for like another 12 months or 15 months for a map, or another 12 to 15 months for a new hero. And music is usually a way to bridge that gap. But in terms of like casting, from the perspective of Riot, China and Korea, and now kind of Japan up and coming, are really key markets for us. So China and Korea more on the League of Legends style side. For Valorant, Korea is a big market, but Japan is also up and coming. And that's why you see that, we're starting to incorporate these casting decisions on our virtual artist and music initiatives. Example being League of the Legends, we casted New Jeans, for the World Championship last year. And then on the virtual boyband Heartsteel, you can see that we've casted Ozzy from Greater China, and we casted Baekhyun from EXO to represent players from China and Korea. And then we did it again in Valorant, with the recent VCT Masters song. The reason why we picked XG is because they fit very nicely in that Venn diagram of servicing Japanese players, but also servicing Korean players. And that is how we make our decision, when we do our music partnerships.
Got it. So do I understand correctly that it is a form also of licensing, where you also find exactly the partners in the targeted market, maybe create content with the franchise, and then that's a way as well, like cross audience, where maybe the audience of the artist will overlap with, in that case, Riot Games, League of Legends.
Exactly.
And okay, got it.
Exactly. And I think this might get into, like, without getting into nitty-gritty, there are ways to do those deals, whether it's a buyout or you do licensing, and there are pros and cons. So, like, for example, like if you foresee that you're going to do your own soundtrack, down the road, let's say, you're going to release a Genshin Impact album, then probably it makes sense to like do a buyout. But if you want something to kind of incentivize the record label to also do marketing promotions on their side, just as we've done with XG, then it probably makes sense to license it with the record label so that they'll be incentivized to push their singles themselves as well. But yeah, that's starting to get into the business affairs side of music partnerships. Yeah.
I'm asking questions from a very novice point of view because this is new for me, but super interesting to understand like the business of music around games. What is the part you play? And, maybe in the series of events, how do you start, like how do you work with your partners? And what is the part that you will do that you can help partners with if they want to, I don't know, have a music representation?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, no, thank you for asking that. So I think for the first part of the question, like what did I used to do at Riot, right? And then I'll go to the second part. So at Riot, I was very fortunate to be part of a small team, small team being 18 of us that covers everything from music supervision to business affairs to label distribution and marketing. And till this day, I'm very, very grateful for Riot to give me the exposure to do different kind of projects. Like in the 2 years that I was there, I wore a lot of different hats, right? So like one of my first projects is to be the creative director of KDA Seraphim. And then with that, I was really a creative director role. Like I got to kind of, form the personality, what's her story, what's her struggles, what does she like? What doesn't she like? Does she like spicy food or does she like something? They're really like, how do we form her as a character? And from that, we get to like a sonic identity. And then that will help us to like know what songs to pick and then also cast the singing voice. And then we really get into granted, like should the singing voice be the same as talking voice? Except it's like being in the Disney Imagineering studio, like creating a new IP. And then from that, I got on to executive produce Arcane Remix album. And shout out to Peter Lee, the music producer that I work with. Our track ended up over-indexing Medusa, the top 100 DJ on YouTube. So we're very,
Wow.
proud of that. And then from that, we also got involved with Heartsteel, the virtual idol, and then also working with like New Jeans and XG. So, and what I do now in my consultancy is that I'm basically offering that kind of 3-discipline help, like whether it's in music supervision, business affairs, or label marketing and distribution for probably, double A studios, that are interested to do the same and recognize that, music might be one way to kind of differentiate on their brand marketing strategies.
Mm-hmm. And, this is a difficult year, 2024. This is not the end. Let's see 2025. But, that's the feedback I get for all studio. Every expense is meticulously examined to, okay, should we spend that budget and so on? So what are the common arguments or, reservation that you find in conversation around music work, like around the marketing? Is it an education problem? Is it a value problem? What are the challenges you're facing?
Yeah, no, it hasn't been easy for sure. I think in our industry, especially the mobile industry, is very ROI and metrics driven, right? But I view like what we do is really more of a brand marketing exercise. It's more of a mindset thing, just as a normal creative agency. Like, what's the ROI of a new logo, right? Like, you don't know,
Yeah.
right? Is it important? Maybe, So I find that it is challenging in that sense. I think in the industry, in terms of music partnerships, we're still lacking a lot of like CTI or like, CTR or like CPI stats that justifies the campaign, even though there's already like more and more of this coming up. But I think the industry still lacks publishing these kind of data. And as a result, it takes a certain skill to convince, certain studio to do this. But I would say at this stage, given the lack of information, I would kind of dress it up as a brand marketing exercise. We ask them, well, what are you doing right now in your music partnerships or entertainment publishing and the results that you're getting? And then compared to where they want to go, and then from there, we will, help them to address the gaps. So it's very nascent. But we are there to handhold our clients to hopefully do something different.
Yeah. And I do understand that it's quite similar to the work I'm doing around leadership, coaching, like especially founders, studios. When I started a year ago, I thought everyone could be a potential client. And I realized actually I'd rather invest my energy where people from the beginning are sharing those principles. Like, do they value the work, the impact of leadership when you have a good leadership teams and so on, because I can spend all my energy to argue, convince. There's a lot of material and build the whole case. But I found actually much more fulfilling, first of all, and pretty straightforward when there's a match exactly on the mindset level. And then you focus your efforts. Like, okay, how are we creating value now that we've agreed we're going to work together? So with the same thinking here, how much have you discovered, like, who are your ideal partners? What are the traits?
I think the ones who are ideal are the ones that really sees the value of music to help them target strategic markets. I'll give you an example. So I think these could be like a Japanese gaming company. Maybe their home markets are saturated, and then it's time for them to try out like Western music and Western music video as a way to hit strategic markets, right? It could be like a Korean, VTuber company where I think VTubers are starting to become ubiquitous. Then maybe it's time to differentiate and give some personality to the VTuber by way of, good music or like a music personality. I find that the sweet spot, kind of lies on that right now. I mean, there is an LA studio that we're talking right now where there's a reverse. I think they see the potential of the Asia Pacific market and they want to find a way, through music and music partnerships to target music markets. So I would say, I think the international marketing strategy where the conversations are a bit easier, to engage with these clients when there's a strategic pain point specifically to target, overseas markets. Yeah, that's easier to engage.
But that's an important question, as you're developing your business to focus exactly on those use cases are pretty straightforward. And then you are developing, an expertise around exactly serving that use case, internationalizing, a presence, entering a market, translating. And we know these days the cost of user acquisition when you go the traditional way, paid way, is just impossible. I mean, I was even connecting with your studio last week. Everyone is in pain. It's like, it's not sustainable when you are a small studio with a reasonable budget. I'm not saying like no budget at all. So this is also an argument for exploring other ways, of reaching an audience. Just buying more attention from an existing market is not sustainable. So more reaching not new audiences, but cross audience. So that's also a point for reflection. And last question, more on your partnership. I'm just curious about your dream project. If you could work with like the company that you dream of on the project, if you have a use case, I'm just curious.
Wow. Thanks for kind of triggering my kind of blue sky thinking.
Yeah.
Right now, because I think on the day to day, I'm biased, right? I think like every game needs a music strategy, but I think I have a soft spot with IPs like Need for Speed, and then what they're doing now with Apex Legends. I feel that those guys haven't really quite done like a pop music video and music video collaboration yet, or they haven't done it in a while. So I think there are some latent opportunities there, But personally, I mean, it's a tough question because I find that like my favorite music and my favorite game genre aren't exactly the same. So like I love listening to a lot of like R&B and soul classics, guys like Eric Clapton, John Mayer, Craig David, Motown, Michael Jackson. But when it comes to like my favorite PC game, like I love the survival horror stuff. So like stuff like Dead Space, Callisto Protocol, the Resident Evils, Amnesias. So I'm kind of struggle with that one. Like, what would be a dream collab? Like, I'm thinking, like maybe a Michael Jackson Thriller type of collaboration on Dead Space 5 or something. I don't know. Like, who knows? But I think the possibilities are endless.
Yeah. Well, thanks for playing with me a bit on that question, because I found that sometimes, what we provide as well in our work is creativity. Yes, maybe that sounds like an odd combination, but maybe that's the value of creating something that hasn't been experienced, right? It doesn't sound to me like such a crazy idea, on paper either. But this is where you have your spark, your creativity to execute something that maybe only a few of you in this world, maybe only you can execute because you have this insight, like from your background, your history, and the expertise, and you combine this together to create something very special.
Yeah.
Like Eric Tan style,
Yeah.
Yeah.
The new Hideo Kojima.
I'm curious about the company you've built. So in 2015, You founded Fifth Journey Limited. I'm curious about what was the company about, what was the phase, and you even raised capital, 7 million, which is a good amount, to have runway, run it for several years. So could we spend some time on that? And let's begin with more of a context on why you decided to start a company. What was that phase of your life?
Sure. Gosh, I think thinking back now, like it was like 2014, and I'm sure you remember this from our Game Loft days. Like, there's a lot of money pouring into mobile gaming at the time. I was kind of 30 something, and I feel like if I need to take the risk, this will be the time to do it now before I have any regrets. So, I mean, looking back, I think it's more kind of personally driven than commercially driven. but nonetheless, I owe it to my, co-founders for their support, that we're able to, like what you just said, raise 7 million in seed round funding and onboarded all these amazing partners as stakeholders of the company. And the genesis of the company was really, we first saw a future where I think a new TV series should go with a new game, which is crazy which is what Netflix is, is doing right now. But I think we sort of had that vision there, but we weren't able to execute that vision. Unfortunately, I think we had that kind of inkling of that direction, heading towards that direction.
And how long was the company running?
We shipped 3 games during that time. So there was a game with Universal Pictures called Kubo and the Two Strings, which at launch generated like 500,000 downloads. This is like 2015 or 2016, by the way. And then we had like Editor's Choice from the China App Store even. So lots of support from Apple there. And then our second game was Pacific Rim Breach Wars, where we worked with Legendary Pictures and Kung Fu Factory to co-publish what is a match 3 RPG. And then we also did a social casino game for the Kong Legendary Pictures IP. So yeah, we were able to ship those 3 games. And then there were also a few games that wasn't able to ship, just didn't kind of pass like alpha metrics, or the different metrics that we're looking at and different hatchets. Yeah, it was pros and cons. We were able to ship 3 games, but I think equally there were also 3 that just didn't make it.
It's been almost like 10 years. It's been a while, so maybe a good point for reflection. What were the things that you would attribute to, timing, context of the market that just made it difficult to grow the business, and more internal reasons that, learning with more wisdom that also didn't help with the outcome?
Oh gosh, there's so many, Sophie. How much time do we have? Do we have until tomorrow? Okay, I would say the big one is that I put together a team that really want to make games, i.e. development. But then I think to get the funding, I think we sold it more as more of a publishing operation. So that was mistake number 1. Like there's like a whole mismatch of what the team really wants to do and what investors expected us to do, right? So that was a mistake number 1. But, looking back, I was very inexperienced. And then when the going gets tough, I was just like, maybe because I'm more of a type B personality, I was just like I just didn't want to get out of bed on tough days. Like I didn't know how to deal with like all these, pressure from investors, pressure from, co-founders and, dealing with partners, ending things with certain business partners. I was just so fresh that I didn't know how to deal with it. As someone that's just like naturally like friendly and don't like confrontations, right? Again, like the kind of type B personality. It was just too much for me. It took me a while. Like it took me like I was on meds, on therapy. It took me like even afterwards. I did a project with Sony Music. I think my psychology just wasn't healthy yet. I think at the time, and again, like kudos to Riot. I think Riot was really the one that kind of saved me in a sense that okay, we value Eric. Let him run this thing. That was probably like the first time where I felt I was able to thrive as a creative individual. And I think it took all of that to make me realize that, I think I am a creative executive. Like, am I a business executive that's doing creative, or am I more of a creative executive that so happens to know a bit of business? And I think it took all that for me to realize and be happy and accepting that, yeah, no, I am a creative executive that so happens to have to like learn business to get by. And I'm happy with that.
I appreciate that because that's the most common story I hear from most founders who, even exited companies sometimes or closed. And it's a very lonely journey. And although you can have a lot of people around you, don't know, partners, co-founders, it feels quite lonely. And looking back, because it's been 10 years, what would have been helpful for you in this? Because it's really tough, when you're doubting yourself. Like you talked about not having energy to get up. Probably there was some pretty deep doubts about getting back to your self-worth, like who are you? If you face that again, what kind of resources would have been helpful?
I think one of the biggest change that I activated in the past year or so is to have an executive coach. I think that helped me a lot. And I'm being mindful here, because I think all of us, can't just like afford an executive coach just like that. But I find a lot of value in having someone that's in the trenches with you that you can bounce ideas off, like even proofread an email or proofread a presentation. I think just having that somebody to like fight together with you, I might have been able to like benefit a lot out of that, which is interesting because you mentioned about like loneliness, right? I think for first time entrepreneurs, like you think like, oh, I have to be the I have to be the know all and end it all. Like I have all the answers.
Far from it.
Yeah, but when in fact I think it's all about being resourceful and trying to find collaborative ways so that you're doing a checklist together and not on your own. That kind of partner.
Yeah. I think there's more and more awareness with entrepreneurs to look for that kind of support, because when you don't have it, you don't know how much you miss it. But when you have it, you know how much you value it. That's also the work I've been doing with some founders. And in a way, it's a bit of an accountability buddy, where you keep progress and also you keep touch with reality, because you have someone here to witness what you do in a very undivided attention way, to just reflect on all the things you do, right? So you're always in touch with your self-worth, your self-esteem, which is really important also in that journey. And you said it also rightly so. It's not, that accessible, affordable, but it's an investment. I always say, do you invest in how to fix the symptoms? So years of therapy and all the damages that, just to recover. And we talk sometimes of 10 years, right? Or do you invest now, which is not like how the brain thinks, on just, it's like going to the gym, hygiene, especially for entrepreneurs, business entrepreneurs. So thanks for sharing that part. So you're again an entrepreneur today. So learning from what you don't probably want to get out of bed, and you have a family. So managing yourself, your time, learning from your venture before and now as you are also an entrepreneur.
Don't ask for outside money until you can make the first dollar yourself.
Love it. 100%.
I think that's my mantra now. Like, don't even think about like outside money until you figure out a way to kind of monetize the first dollar yourself, right? So I run more of a boutique marketing consultancy, and I have, work with bulk with clients, for anything from the kind of like monthly retainer, like upfront to like monthly, and maybe a little bit of back end, a revenue incentivization. But for sure, I think now there's the complexity of like having a family, but I would say, I think that's more of a driver when I see like the face of my daughters, now there's like a purpose. It's like, okay, I know what I'm working hard for. I'm not working hard to go clubbing on the weekends. Now I'm working hard so that, okay, my girls will be able to go to school and then, I'll see them, growing up. So I would say it's been a motivational factor there. But yeah, I think now I'm going back to small and nimble. Yeah, it's nice to have that kind of, like so-and-so company takes stakes in your company and you raise so-and-so. But if you don't have like the core product, core offering and a small business to start with, I think looking back now, in my case anyway, I think it was a little bit premature. Tough pill to swallow, but I'm starting again.
Yeah, a lot of wisdom. It shows the work of reflection you've done, because you are summarizing it in very simple, concise words, but there's a lot that has happened. But it sounds like you've really internalized as well the learnings and the wisdom, like the right order of priority for you. Sounds lovely. At last, I will ask that question. So how people can reach out to you, and what are the next things where you will be, you're excited about for the end of the year?
My consultancy is called Sway, and my website is swaymedia.io. But otherwise, I'm also very active on LinkedIn. If you search Eric Tan Sway or Eric Tan Ride Games or Eric Tan Game Off, you'll find me. And where do I find interesting? Again, like I said just now, I think the intersection of music and games, there's still so many room to do. I think like Riot and Activision Blizzard and PUBG and has just kind of started that. But I think, are we at the place where, I think every game has a James Bond theme song, or every game has a very memorable KDA game song? I don't think so. So I think there's still a lot of room for growth in that respect, and hope to be able to contribute more to that space. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We'll look out for the Need for Speed music project that you mentioned, or the thriller, Dead Space horror, and Eric Clapton collaboration.
Eric Clapton bluesy song for Dead Space. Okay.
Yeah.
It has to be very spacey guitar solo, I think.
Yeah. Well, when I say that, I think of Fallout. I think there's a kind of a good mix here. Fallout, has a quite grim, dark, dystopian experience, and then you have a lot of kind of a jazz music that fits really well. So it's possible.
Yeah.
Well, thanks a lot for this conversation today, Rick, and enlightening us a bit more about music and also sharing your entrepreneurial journey. So I wish you the best for your growing business in music, and we'll follow what you're doing.
Thank you, Sophie.
Take care.
Take care.
Thanks for listening to this latest episode of the Rise and Play podcast. We keep growing our community of conscious leaders across the industry and beyond. If you want to join this movement, please share the podcast with other conscious leaders, because we have so much more we can learn from each other. And if you want to accelerate your growth, I offer creative leadership coaching and workshop, plus other free resources that you can find on riseandplay.io. I can't wait to connect with you. Have a great week, and remember to take care of yourself. Until the next time,